You are listening to Essence, a podcast about story, journey, and self. Hello, and welcome to Lore, a podcast about story, journey, and self. On today's episode, I'm really pleased to have as my guest Di Riseborough. Di is a registered psychotherapist. She's a life coach, an intuitive life strategist, and a transformational healer based down in London, Ontario. I first met Di a couple of years ago when I was doing my own training in psychotherapy up in Toronto. Di had graduated from the same program as me a couple of years before, and she came in to teach one of the classes and shared more of her story. And her story really struck me back then, and so I was very eager to have her on the show. Today we'll be talking a great deal about forgiveness, and we'll be talking about surrender. Two huge, big, important topics that come up in my own personal work and my work with clients all the time. And I think they're both topics that a lot of people struggle with or have some sort of a relationship with. And so I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with Di. As always, if you're interested in learning more about our guest, all of the information will be down in the show notes down below. Whichever social media page you're seeing this on, please do consider hitting subscribe or hitting like to stay up to date with these episodes and some of the other features. And without further ado, let's dive right into my conversation with Di Riseborough. Di, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ben.
So, as we were talking about just a few minutes ago, Di is a registered psychotherapist, a life coach, an intuitive life strategist, and a transformational healer located in London, Ontario. She's been in practice as a psychotherapist at least since 2016, and you've been a life coach for a lot longer than that. So what does all that mean? If somebody is listening to this and not aware of what counseling, therapy, life coach is, what does all that mean to you?
Well, that's a good question because, I think we spoke a little bit earlier, but I don't like labels, but we have to call ourselves something. I'm a lawyer, I'm a teacher, or whatever. So I like to use the term intuitive life strategist because it encompasses a multidimensional aspect of who I am. I'm very intuitive. I use that in my work with my clients. With my psychotherapy background as well, I'll take it into working with my clients. The other thing is the life skills, and also my actual training and life coaching in terms of, helping people get clear about what they want in life. It's a little bit different than the psychotherapy, as well as, when I have clients come to me, Ben, people want tools. And I am of the mindset that I don't ask my clients to do something that I haven't done, because I don't think that's fair. You can only take your clients as far as you've gone. And to be a healthy, supportive therapist to facilitate your clients' healing, I feel you should be doing your own work. Yes. And I continue to do my work. I mean, I've been doing my work for a long time. And actually, right now, I'm in still another program. So I still keep doing my work. And each time you're in a program, you have to go deep inside. So all the tools that I give my clients, they have the awareness. But if you don't give them something to do, how do they bring about change? We can talk about stuff, but nothing changes. So in the intuitive life strategist aspect, I use a number of different things, even my own wisdom, in my own journey in my life, and how I incorporate it with them. And it's basically a whole space that way.
And so holding space for them to go into those deep places. And I suppose also too, having done your work, I mean, we come from the same program at Transformational Arts College, and I mean, we had to do at least 100 hours of personal therapy just in order to finish that program. I find anyways, being able to hold space, being able to know how big that space should be held or can be held for that client, and in recognizing our own work, we recognize the work of the client. And you've done a fair bit of work in your life. What are some of the key moments that have contributed to where you are now?
That's a good question. So you need to have 100 hours at TAC. I got an exemption because I've done a lot more than 100 hours. I actually, it was funny. You mentioned that I had a little smile come to me because I was one of those people like, oh, I don't need therapy. I don't need therapy. There's nothing wrong with me, right? No. And now I think everybody needs therapy. Purely because of my own healing journey. First of all, it's not it's for courageous hearts. It's for people that want to go deep. It's scary. But I'll tell you, the rewards of it are amazing. And I feel it in my body when I talk about that. I know if I think back where I was to where I am now in my journey, it's like night and day. Like there's the darkness. I live in the light. I mean, not that I didn't live in the light beforehand, but in my journey, the events that created so much trauma for me that I had to deal with, that was very dark. And to get out of that darkness and to where I am right now in my life, the investment, I didn't go on trips. I invested. I wasn't, we didn't have coverage, like insurance often doesn't cover psychotherapists, but I invested all my money into my psychotherapy, not because of going to psychotherapy, but inside myself. Like I value myself enough to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put it here. My priority was I wanted healing and I don't want to be in this pain anymore. Like it's possible, right? So the things that I learned from that predominantly is do your work. Do your work because the rewards can be amazing if you stick to it and do your work. And the other thing I learned is surrender.
Surrender.
Oh, that's a hard one.
That is a big word, and I love it. Love the word surrender.
Surrender, let go. Surrender. Two emotions, love or fear, right? And most of us are living in fear. We have moments of love, but if we're not making conscious choices from love, we're always in a subconscious fear. So when we don't surrender, where are we hanging out? In fear. With the control. We're trying to control things around us. And I remember when I mentioned, I think earlier before we began, I said the energy part of my life, the work I do with energy, is a hard thing for me because I have this natural flow of energy and I don't have a language for it. So, when I wanted to go and have some training, I got my Reiki like 25 years ago. Whatever. It's beyond the Reiki. But when people ask me, well, what do you do? It's like, I don't know. I just put my hand in, it just flies out. And then they all get up and they go, oh, wow, this is awesome. It's like, oh, whatever. I see what goes on. I see what happens. But if you want a language or what it's called, I can't give you that. And I remember many, many years ago, probably about 8 years now, that I would have so much fear come up with that. So much fear, trying to find the language for it. And I remember the one time my guides, I was doing something and suddenly it was like the driveway door just came down. And it was black. I couldn't see what I was doing anymore. It was like, oh, I'm blind. And I heard a voice says, you need to surrender. And it's like, what? I'm not going to surrender. Like, oh, because I might hurt, we have these fears. I might hurt somebody. And that's one of my biggest fears. I don't want to create pain for somebody. If I'm facilitating healing, my biggest fear is creating more trauma for somebody. Right. And so that is in my own core belief system that I am working through on that. It's not creating pain for somebody else, right? And when that happened, it was like, nope. It's like, okay, so I kind of got a sense what I was still doing, but I literally had to surrender. So the fact that I can talk to you here, I have no fear. And if you ask me what the energy is, like, I don't know. And you know what's interesting? After that, after I fully surrendered, it took me about 2 years. I kept it down for about 2 years until I finally surrendered. It's like, okay, I surrender. I surrender the higher power. Like I really let go. And this let go was a bit of control, right? But this was let go, like totally. After that, people would never ask me. They just come and do it. They would never ask me what I do. And I was like, I'll just do it. And they go, wow, that's awesome. And leave, right? And I still, if people ask me, I go, I don't know. They go, okay. And we start, and I'll
This is marvelous.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't advertise like, oh, come let's have an energy session. I don't work like that. I use it in my work as a, multifaceted, tool when I'm working with a client. If it comes up, I ask, are you open to this? If it comes up in a session, are you open if I, touch your shoulder?
Mm-hmm.
And they go, yeah. And then I go, what did you do? Because it just popped, right? It's like, well, I just, released whatever's sitting in your shoulder. But the key here is with the help of the client, because the natural healer is within them. Exactly. So I will talk away, and sometimes they just need a little jolt. When your car doesn't run the battery, you need to kickstart the car. Yeah. It's just something like that.
Yeah. There's almost, absolutely. There was almost a piece in there about when you talked about the client asking you, it was almost like your shadow and their shadow were coming together, and it was like butting heads. Yep. The reason that they're asking is because they are working with issues of trust and control.
Yep. That's
just
true.
Like how we are, right?
Exactly. And that's how it works, right? Everything's a mirror, and everything will manifest into your reality based on, what are you doing? Your inner world, your outer world is manifestation of your inner world, right? So as soon as I finally let go, nobody was asking me, to explain what it was, right? I was like, yeah, I don't know, and I trust it for whatever it is, right?
And that really ties into that word surrender, trust.
Oh, big time. And I think that's, our core beliefs. A lot of people have trust issues, right? Trusting themselves, trusting people, trusting life in general. So if you really have that hardwired into your brain, it can be hard. I mean, it can be hard, especially in our wounding, right? We trust people, and even in my own work after my grandmother was murdered, I struggled to trust people.
Yes.
Like, somebody would come by like, well, what do they want? Like, what's their motive, right? Because suddenly, up until that point, I had been a very trusting person to some degree, but I was hypervigilant anyway because I'm intuitive, right? My intuition would put up a red flag that something was off. I mean, I listen for energy. If the energy fits the lips, this is how I watch. If the lips are moving and the energy is aligned with the person telling me the truth. If the lip is moving and the energy is not aligned, guess which one I'm listening to? Yes. I won't come out and say you're lying to me. I'm just consciously aware that what I'm being told is not necessarily the truth.
Yes. And this, yes, because there's that intuitive piece there. And the gut feeling, like a lot of people I work with and my mentors and my people in my life, they're always saying, trust your gut, because there's something in the gut, that sense of intuitive, that is taking in all of these other aspects that we're not maybe aware of up here.
Yeah.
Right. And people get into these, at least I find, maybe you find them too, people get into these tizzies where they're wanting to trust somebody, but it's not them that they're wanting to trust, it's the projection.
That's true. It can be. Yeah. Definitely.
And there's this weird cognitive dissonance because they know that this individual is lying to them, but they don't know it, right?
That's true. Yeah. So it's interesting, the trust and the surrender. The surrender is really about, I don't know, our training is my connection to spirit or to source has always been very strong. And I think it's guided me a lot in my life. It still continues to this day, right? I wouldn't be where I am today without that. And so part of that surrender is to surrendering to that, and letting go of the control, surrendering into the flow. Like, what does that flow look like? And when you're in the flow, there are times where I'm in the flow and I have no idea where I'm going.
Totally true.
I just know it's taking me somewhere. And then all the signs are there anyway.
Yes.
I get a sense of where I'm going, but it's not concrete necessarily, which is interesting because when I work with some business owners, like, what are the goals? And we got to, so we have these two different places, right? You have a lot of like ambitious people, like Tony Robbins, and you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And then you have the other one where you let go. So how do we match those two?
That's the thing.
It can be hard.
Yeah, exactly. Tell me a little bit about about forgiveness. So anybody who's watching this, go to Di's website. On her profile, she talks about the death and murder of her grandmother. You went through a whole process around forgiveness. How does trust, intuition, and surrender come into that part of your story, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure, that's a really interesting question. You know, the way of forgiveness actually is not natural for us. So I think this is what people are struggling with. And, you know, often I have conversations with people in my social media, especially when I'm posting about forgiveness. The myths in my book I wrote, a very short little book, because most people dissociate when we come to forgiveness. It brings up a lot of pain for a lot of people, so it can be very hard to read a 200-page book on forgiveness. It's really a lot of waffle and philosophy. Mine is straight to the point, and then do your work, because I find that it can be hard. And when I write about that, I write about the myths of forgiveness. And often with the thing with forgiveness really got to do with nobody else. Really, it's all about you letting go your pain and your connection. You know, I remember when I was doing my speaking about forgiveness, that I always had this little thing of chains. And I'd say, you know, the murderer, the man who killed my granddaughter, was incarcerated in prison, but I was emotionally incarcerated. I'm not sure which is worse, the physical or the emotional. For me, it was the emotional. I mean, I still go on, and this is the funny thing with forgiveness. This is my view, and this is only my view and my perception of what forgiveness is, my journey. You know, other people have different ways of forgiving, but what I found for true forgiveness is actually the mind can forgive long before the body is ready to. You know, I do a modality with my clients, a lot of somatic work with my clients, because trauma doesn't sit here unless you hit your head. You know, the trauma is in your body. It's holographically imposed in your cells. We have memory cells, right? So it's held in your body. We have all this armor that protects us. And when I use integral breath therapy, which takes my clients into an altered state, and I've done it myself, I've been using it. I came across it 13 years myself in my work with forgiveness, actually. You know, true forgiveness happens when you have an emotional and physical release, not the head. My head had gone way ahead. And like, yeah, I moved to a different country, you know, moved on. But did I really? Not really. I did not. I was still stuck in 1995, the day that she was murdered, right? And the whole point of this work is doing the work. Forgiveness is hard because we don't want to let go. We don't want to let go of the anger. It really is about emotional work. Right. It's dealing with your feelings. You know, when I get up and I talk about forgiveness to a lot of people, I always start off with like, okay, you know, how many people have forgiven somebody? Think of somebody you've forgiven. I said, put your hands up. And they all go like, woohoo. And I go, okay.
And very quickly.
Of course, quickly they're forgiven, right? And I go, okay, all right, now I want you to close your eyes. And I take them to a little meditative state. And I go, you're walking down a grocery store and you take a box of Cheerios off over here and you put a bit of this into your cart. And as you round the corner, there is this person that you've forgiven, right? What is your initial reaction physically? Did you hold your breath? Did you get small? Did you want to run away? Did you know, what is your emotional response to this? And I go, if you still have forgiven that person, put your hand down. The rest of you keep your hands up. And I still have their hands up. I said, well, you really haven't. In your mind, you have. Yes. But in your heart, you haven't. Yes. And the journey from here to here is probably your longest, right? And so that's the thing with forgiveness. It is an emotional and physical release. And I know in my personal journey, you know, I invest a lot of my own work. I was of the mindset, you don't need therapy. Well, I'm a practicing therapist now. Before this, I was a highly acclaimed poultry specialist. I worked in agriculture and animal health for 17 years. And now I do this. So like, what? Yeah. But I had such a powerful experience in my own journey that I decided to do this, because I know how powerful this can be. And I wanted to be able to be able to hold space, create safety, and facilitate other people's healings so they can live a life of joy. Because I have so much joy. And I was so angry after that happened, and I come from South Africa, so we don't have a social system like you have for counseling. We have no counseling. Like, not only did I lose my grandmother that day, and that was very tough, and we talk about the intuition aspect, because when I did get to the house, it was made as it was a robbery. Meanwhile, what actually happened was my uncle's estranged wife had convinced his son, his stepson, to murder my grandmother for supposed money that she had was worth millions, which is not true. And so it made it look like a robbery. And, my hypervigilance is like, I got there and it's like, no, I'm going to solve the problem here. That's my rescuer. It's like my fixer. It's like, I'm going to solve the problem. And I remember walking around the house going, something doesn't feel right here. Because at that stage, we didn't know that they'd been involved, right? And I could feel it. I could say, somebody in their family's involved. I don't know why, but I'm feeling it. I could feel it in the energy. There's somebody she knew. And I remember going into the kitchen. The police had been there for hours before because I got on late. And something said to me, push the microwave button. And I did. And there was a cup of coffee in the, it was a coffee mug. And first of all, my grandmother doesn't drink coffee. Right. And the second thing is the cup is a good cup, not the kitchen cups. And the only people that had the kitchen cups were like my immediate family, my father, my mom, my sister, myself, right, and her. Other people who came to visit, including my uncle, and that would have the good cups, right? So I called the police over and said, hey, did you dust this? Did you check that? Somebody... So about 2 weeks later, it came out. Yeah, it was a family member, right? And so that was traumatic in itself, right? His brothers, linked to our family. And not only that, my mom found her. So my mom never recovered emotionally or mentally. That took a real big toll on her. And my dad died about 3 years later. So he was 53. Like, I lost my father very young.
Very young.
Very young. The stress of that, right? And, he didn't, like I said, none of us got counseling for this. Yeah. Like, we just carried on, right? You just keep going, and it was almost a year to the date that my grandmother's trial, the murder trial, came to being. Mm-hmm. And then it was traumatic on top of that again, because, I drove my parents they lived in Johannesburg. I went up for the trial. I think the trial was about 2 weeks. And I remember every day driving into the downtown, and there would be these huge news bulletin boards, like, grandmother killed with barbecue knife and fork, right? And it's just like in your face, like the reporters, and they're not reporting the truth. No, it's not. So, I know, like, when I watch people here and on TV and people get murdered and they report and they talk to the family, I understand reporting, but sometimes it just like, you're not reporting the truth. So it was traumatic on top of that as well, having to go through that all over again and sitting through the trial. And there was a state where, now this stage, he had confessed that his mother had orchestrated, but he retracted it. So we already knew, but she was free to walk around. And so I wasn't sure who I was more angry with, him or her. But I remember, how the universe works, right? I remember, I still see this because it's part of the story. We in the courtroom, and we would go away for lunch. We're coming back, and I'm standing in the elevator with the doors open, and we're trying to go up. And she's walking towards us with the stenographer. Somehow they're like chatting, everything is cool. Yeah. It's like, what? How are you all friends with a potential murderer here, right? Doesn't make sense. And I'm standing there with my mom and my mom's best friend, and the button will not work, won't close the blooming thing, right? Because now I can just feel my anger coming out. I'm suppressing my anger all the time. And I remember she gets in and she's standing in front of me, Ben, right in front of me. And I took my hands like this and dug my nails in because I had to control myself, because all I really wanted to do was go like this. Literally strangle her. I was so angry, but I had to control myself, and I did. And they walked out, and then my mom's friend said, "Are you okay?" And I went, "Oh, I'm fine." She said, "Look at your hand." There was just blood running down. I'd actually cut my skin, and I was white as a ghost. And we went but that's how to control my anger, and that's what I did over the years. I controlled my anger. Of course, it would, come out and burst and stuff like that, but I'd keep pushing it down.
Right.
Pushing it down, right? And then when I started actually doing my work, I did my anger release for the first time, I was scared. I was scared to do my first anger release because I thought, if I unleash this, where the hell? I mean, and this feels like a tornado is going to come out. The poor therapist, the room will be destroyed, And I see, so I can relate when I'm working with clients that are afraid of their anger. I was like, it's okay. I get you. I get it. Right? But I promise you, it's not as bad as you think it is. But once I started working through it, and going through that anger, because the anger is a big thing in forgiveness. We really hurt, right? But it manifests as anger. There was grief as well. And there was a lot of shame for me too, because that morning when my grandmother was murdered, being intuitive and having a gift, as people call it, my grandfather had come to me. Right. Spirit comes to you, the smell of tobacco. And I actually mistook it as my mom had been smoking. Right. Because I was actually up in Johannesburg at the time for a business meeting. I was staying with my parents, and it was my grandfather, Spirit, coming to me. And so I felt guilty that I didn't save her. For in my work, there was a lot to unpack of that I, with this gift, should have saved her, right?
Taking this responsibility, right?
Oh, of course, it's my responsibility. That's part of my thing. Is from already, I'm responsible for all this, right? And it's not true. But going and having to do, I think part of the process of forgiveness, it's like grief. Forgiveness is a process. It's just like grief. We have to work at it. And the thing is, it's a skill we need to learn. And we all can learn it. My key here is we can all learn this. Mm-hmm. And it's, and it's good to get somebody to work with you through it, because that was helpful for me. And when I went through my work, my own personal work, hundreds of hours of therapy, intensives. The intensives were really great. I did a lot of integral breath therapy, which is a modality that I use, where, we go into an altered state, and I'd go back to that aspect. And I could actually, at one point, I'd been working away for a while. And at one point, I could actually feel my heart heal. My heart healed. I could feel it in my body. It was like, I think I've got it. I think I'm done. It was beautiful. It was one of the most beautiful moments, I would say, in my journey.
What was that? What was the feeling like? What was that?
What was the feeling like?
Like?
It was like both an expansive feeling, like it blew open. Like my heart was blew open, but it also not closed, but came together.
Right.
I'm not sure how to explain it to you, but it was like the bandage just sort of. Now think about when we heal. That all that comes, that healing happens. Just somehow it works. The cells come together, whatever. My heart's expansive. It was huge, but at the same time, it was healed. I could feel it was whole. It was whole again. There we go. The word whole, I guess. It didn't feel holy. It felt whole. And I remember after that, I was still working in agriculture at the time and animal health. And I was driving, and Susan. So up until that point, anytime I met a Susan, of course, universe does it, right? I got triggered. Like just the name Susan, this anger would come up. Of course, the person, I was conscious enough to know the person in front of me is not Susan. I'd have to control my anger and go, oh, hello, Susan. And it's like, so just the name Susan would be such a trigger for me. And so about a week after I'd finished this, Susan's face actually started coming into my consciousness, and I had no emotional response.
Interesting. Yeah.
There was no anger. There was like, oh, hey, Susan, whatever, right? So for the week, it was strong in the beginning. By the end of the week, she'd faded out totally faded out. Now, the interesting story is, I'm not quite sure, I think it was about November, October, I did that. And the next year, I think it was probably February, March, I actually went back to South Africa to go and see him.
Right.
I hadn't seen him for 12 years. I wanted to test. See, I'm a scientist, right? I wanted to test that all this work that I've done was real.
Yeah.
I wanted to see if I had truly forgiven him, if I truly reached that place of true forgiveness, that there was no longer an attachment emotionally or mentally, And so the universe again provided it. I mean, I said to the universe on the internet, just show me where I've got to, I don't know where he was, what prison he was in, if he was still in prison. But let me tell you, when you talk about surrender and the flow, those angels work through the keyboards. They took me to, I don't know how it happened, but it happened. Got in touch with the victims charter. The warden contacted me, made it a special thing. I drove down when I got to South Africa. I was a bit nervous because, like I was built up all this stuff, and everybody around me is like, "Why are you doing that? What's wrong with you?" It's like, this is my journey, not yours, right? And to this day, I don't even remember half the stuff he said. I was with him for 2 hours, but all I will remember talking to him and telling him how his actions had impacted me and my family. And then I got up and I had this need to hug him, which is like, if you ever, even though you forgiveness, I'm not saying that all my clients or anybody who works with forgiveness, you need to hug your offender. No, not at all. But I had this urge, like I just felt this energy come into this room. And I asked him, can I give you a hug? And he was like a little bit hesitant, right? And I told him before, I said, you need to forgive yourself. And he said he couldn't. And I told him I had forgiven him. And so he said, okay, I'll give, and I hadn't seen him for a long time. So I went to hug him. Then, like the room got so big, my heart like opened. I felt so much love for this man. And I just held him. I don't know for how long. I just stood there, held him. And I whispered to him and I told him he needs to forgive himself. I'd forgiven him and he just started crying. And I just held him and I can still feel it in my heart as I talk about it now. I can feel that energy around that. It was beautiful, the most beautiful moment in my life. From all that pain to where I got, what the experience I got. And then I got to my car and I felt so much joy.
Yes.
Because that's what forgiveness is a foundation. It's also a building block for our worthiness.
Yes.
Right? So I'm worthy of giving love. I'm worthy of receiving that. In that moment, I received so much love. Right? But the joy that comes out of that, wow, it's just like I sat in the car, I was like, woohoo,
Joy of release.
It was such a release. And I just thought all this like hard work that I'd done, it wasn't like, it was like 3 to 4 years, I can't remember. But it was intensive. Like I've done about 600 hours of intense, like 30-hour weekends. Integral breath therapy had been a big part of it for me. Personally, psychodrama was another big part of it for me. Because the depth, even now when I work with my client, when I'm dealing with inner child work, in order to get corrective action, we do need to go into that altered state. Absolutely. Talking about it is fine, but after a while I got sick of my story.
Yeah. Because the story gets in the way.
Yeah, I get past the story. It's just feel what it is. Get my anger back out, get my sadness, my grief, my shame, all of that out.
Do you find that assists you in your work now? Because you told me before you're one of only 4 people in Canada who is designated and certified through this breath technique. Do you feel that really assists you with guiding people to that deep place?
It does, because it opens me up. So when I'm working with somebody, I'm connected with them.
Yes.
Like, and it's not just because of that, the way I've done my work, but what is interesting, Ben, is I'm a firm believer, based on my own experience, the more you do your own personal work, the stronger your intuition gets. Yes. After every weekend, after every piece of like deep work, my intuition will be off the scale. I'll be picking up people in Australia. I'll be eating my dinner and feel a wave of grief come over and just burst into tears. Like, I'm watching Big Bang Theory. Why am I crying? And then I get a mental picture of this person. And I just Facebook them. Are you okay? Oh, no, my mom came in and I'm grieving the loss. It's like, okay, that's not mine. And then it disappears, right? So I will say that the more, because our natural being is that light, right? The more you do your work, the closer you get to that light again. And it's the same thing. So as I'm a healer, but I'll use that word, healing. Okay. The wounded healer, right? However, if people are on this journey, I very seldom let people touch my energy field. Like people say, I'll give you some Reiki. I was like, no, thank you. It's okay. I'm good. Thanks. Mainly because unless you've done your work, you need to be a clean vessel.
Mm.
As clean as you possibly can be. Because for me, I feel the more I do my work, the cleaner I am for the people I work with. And that's why the energy can be so powerful, because I'm not carrying, there's no blockages. There's nothing in me that has been transmuted onto them. That's my stuff here. The energy flows through me. But a lot of people, that does not happen.
No, they just take on, and then it compounds their own stuff. Yes.
Correct. And so it does help me with my clients. And, I see them and, the healing that happens through them. And that's the thing, is like, well, I've done lots of therapy, but for 10 years, but I get like the 6 months you get from you, it's like, what the hell? Okay. There's different ways of reaching. You're obviously ready now, right? Not for everybody. You got to be ready for it.
And that's a big point right there, that piece about being ready for it. I also feel like the universe conspires very much so in facilitating those spaces where when you're ready, it will happen. I'll give you an example. So as you were talking about forgiveness, I was reflecting on my own life of a relationship I had many years ago. And it's the more I started doing my own personal work about 6 years ago, really stepping into my own personal work, and TAC definitely helped with that. This relationship was like with my best friend. He was like, we were close, and a situation happened where I hurt him and he hurt me back, in response to that initial issue. And we didn't talk to each other for years. Mm-hmm. Now I thought he was in another province, and, it turns out, so I moved to Hamilton about 3 years ago. Turns out that he had been in Hamilton for a very long time. Wow. Turns out that his office was about 5 minutes around the corner from where I live. Turns out that he was seeing the therapist when I was starting to do my case studies. He was seeing the therapist who had the office next door to mine.
Wow.
And so we reconnected, and the first time we sat down together after a very, very, very long time, 20 tense minutes of us staring at each other, eating breakfast, like, and staring at each other, almost on the verge of tears. And then a break happened, and we were able to step into that place. But I do truly believe that if we had met at any other previous period before that, we wouldn't have been ready for that healing. No,
you're right. And it is the timing. Timing is important as well. It is. There's something greater at work, whether you believe it or not. Yeah. There is still something greater. It is important, and you have to be willing. And I always say, face your fear and do it anyway. It's scary. I mean, it is scary. Like, what I did is like, I'm going to go and do it. My therapist would say, you're so courageous. Like, I wouldn't do that. It's like, courage is better. My fears, this where I'm stuck is worse. I'll move through this. And when you talk about the universe is conspiring, so when I had, done that last piece of my healing and I'd gone back, before he came in, I'd asked the warden if he had shown any remorse, because I was curious, because he was called a psychopath, right? By whoever diagnosed him by a psychiatrist, right? And the warden said, actually, not really until just recently. And I go, well, what's different? His mother died of a heart attack. So, and I asked, of course I go, so when right about was this? I said, it was just before Christmas. Like, I couldn't remember, but it was before this, the Christmas period. And I go, well, who released who? Did I release Susan, or did she release me?
Right.
Yeah, that contract, right?
Absolutely. And that key point there, release. Because a lot of people, I find, take forgiveness as I have to condone what happened.
No, never.
When it's all about instead release, and releasing the individuals to the opportunity for growth. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah. And that's the thing with forgiveness. Really, it is about we have to forgive ourselves. Like, part of it is also forgiving yourself for holding on for so long. Yeah. But really, it is not about, as you say, condoning. I never condone them for what they did. I mean, there's no hope in hell, And it's the same. And one thing I do talk about in my book is reconciliation. And people get a little bit confused. Because like, well, now you've forgiven me, let's be friends. Like, believe me. I mean, after he got out of jail, I think he emailed me and he Facebooked me as a friend on Facebook. And I was like, what? No. We're not going to be friends. Like, I've released you and you're not in my life and you haven't been in my life, but we're not going to be Facebook buddies. And it's like, no, I mean, reconciliation doesn't mean we become buddies again. There's boundaries. And the thing is, when I say to people, when you forgive, if you want to reconcile, it has to be both parties have to be willing to, right? And that's the thing, you want to move on. So for a strange family, that can be a bit hard, right? But again, it has to be, and if they are reconciling, then clear boundaries need to be discussed of what that looks like. Because people say, well, I keep forgiving over and over again. I said, well, let's talk about your boundaries.
It's an important thing, yeah.
Of course it is. You want to forgive and you want to reconcile, then what are you doing that keeps this forgiving over and over? What are you, what's happening, right? So there's a distinction.
Yeah.
Because you forgive doesn't mean you want to be buddies.
Right. There's, in a way, that speaks to, again, being caught in that relationship just in a different way. I'm still going to have you in my life, but now it's on my terms. It's a control drama over again. Of
course it is. Yeah. So, I mean, it depends. I mean, each person's different, but it is a very powerful journey as long as the people recognize that it's like grief. It doesn't happen overnight. Yeah. And it is a place, of the emotional and physical release. So you need to move into that heart space. Often I argue with people. I don't argue. I just, comment. They go, let go and let God. I go, well, hold on. No. God gave you a heart for a reason. It's your responsibility to be part of what God is helping you with. You don't just give it over to God and he's going to heal your heart. That is like, giving away your power,
Absolutely.
Or not taking responsibility. You're just as responsible for your healing as that power above you or around you or whatever. So you're co-creating. So you have to step into that too. You can't just lie back and go, oh, just forget my heart, fix it for me and I'm all good. That is an avoidance technique.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. What would you say to someone who's listening to this who is hearing you talk and saying, well, I could never get to where she is. I'm really angry. I'm really sitting in this place of, I'm never going to forgive that person. But they're open to what you're saying. What would you say to them?
Well, that's a good thing. So you have to want to be willing to forgive. That's the first step, and not everybody's ready. Yeah. So that's the thing, is that if you're willing to work on forgiveness, then you say to yourself, I'm willing to work with it or go through it and deal with my anger, deal with the emotions that are attached to this, my betrayal. I mean, I'm sure I deal with clients that have been cheated on. Yep. There's a sense of betrayal. We need to deal with the betrayal, right? And the trust issues and all that kind of stuff. But you have to be willing to do that. If you're not willing to do that, it just means you're not ready right now. Maybe you can be ready in 6 months' time. You'll know when you're ready. But the first step is to be willing. I remember when I was interviewed on the Oprah Winfrey Network with the series. I know, it was so cool. In Toronto, sitting on the purple couch. There was an episode on forgiveness and revenge. Mm-hmm. Because believe me, I had revenge fantasies, and I always talk to my clients. It's okay to have your revenge fantasies because we have so much shame around that. Like, I can't be. I know I'm not a bad person. I'm a kind, compassionate person, but there was a part of me that wanted to hurt him. Yeah. I was in so much pain that I wanted to make him suffer. Yeah. Right?
I want you to feel what I'm feeling now.
Exactly. But the thing is, there's a part of, well, you're a bad person to have those thoughts, right? And there's the shame. It's like, no. So I encourage my clients to write out your revenge fantasies, and work through the shame of releasing it, because that's part of the healing of forgiveness, is all these feelings that are with this process, right? And I would have spend hours thinking about it. Have I gone to his cell? What I do with him? Like, I torture him. And afterwards I go, oh my God, you're very dark. And then I go, well, that's just a part of me, right? But it was a strong part of me at the time. So when we were doing that episode, they were asking all of us, there were lots of us, about forgiveness and revenge. And I speak about, coming to a place of forgiveness versus choosing revenge. And they interviewed a couple of people on the show, and I will never forget this. Dale was one of the interviewers, and he's a psychotherapist in Toronto. He interviewed one person. I think she was the last person on the show, and I still see this in my mind. She's sitting on a bench, and he asked her about forgiveness, and she says, "I will never forgive." And I felt so sad for her. I felt so sad. I actually burst into tears when I watched that part. I mean, it was emotional watching the whole series.
Absolutely.
But when she said that, I felt so much sadness, because I thought to her that you have no idea what it feels like when you get to the other side. I know it's painful right now, and and that's okay. That's her choice, right? And some people will never forgive, and that's their choices. Like I said, you have to be willing. It comes down to a choice again with everything in life, Ben. It's a choice. You have to be willing to. And I would suggest, if you have a really tough thing, find somebody, find a therapist, a counselor to work through it with you. You don't have to do this alone. Like, I don't think I would have done it alone. I had one of the best therapists for me personally. She called me on my stuff within 15 minutes. I was like, whoa. And then I remember sitting in my car going, after I committed to, okay, I'm going to do this. And I remember thinking, oh shit, I'm screwed. Because once I've committed to something, I'm committed. I'm not running away.
That's the surrender piece, right? That hesitation.
Yeah.
You have to surrender to the process.
You have to surrender to it. You have to let go. And life is about letting go.
Yes.
That's what the grieving process is, letting go.
Oh, absolutely.
Because nothing stays the same, right?
Well, and we tend to, ironically, we tend to comfort ourselves with maladaptive, dysfunctional, unhealthy things. Junk food, not forgiving people, being angry, standing in the shower, going over and over and over conversations in our mind that we will never revisit, and we can never say the perfect thing again in, right?
That's true.
Right? Lying in bed at night, dwelling, but there's a comfort in that. Because
of course it was just familiar.
Yeah.
I mean, I got used to that as well. Like, I mean, my conversations I have in my head, or my anger, or my projection of anger into any little thing, it became familiar. My anger, if you think about it, I ask people, what's your go-to emotion?
Yes.
My anger was my go-to emotion. It felt safe. Yes. It feels comfortable. I know what this place is, so why would I give it up? Right? But, there's a time, there was a point where I thought, okay, I'm tired of listening to myself. And also, I don't want to hear the story over and over again. So, we have to make, again, the choices.
Yes.
Absolutely. I think people forget that we have that power to make a choice.
Yeah.
And a hard decision doesn't mean it's the wrong decision.
No. I think people, to that point, people forget that they have the choice, or they're unwilling to live with the potential consequences. And so it's sometimes easier to just stay in that limbo of not making a choice.
Yeah, and then I said to them, you still made a choice.
Yes.
They go, what?
Exactly.
No, you chose to do nothing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So choose the choice that's of least resistance.
Yes, exactly. No, exactly. So I found, in my life, I found going into the somatic really, really works. Just to come back to your modality of breath work. If, last question then for today, if people were interested in getting out of here where all of everything is and going into the body through breath work, if they wanted to come and see you, take us through kind of what that process would look like.
Sure. So the type of modality that I'm trained in, there's lots of breath work on an umbrella. Yogis use it. There's the William Haas. There's no ways I'm getting into cold water because that's shock as well. And the type of work that I do is called integral breath therapy. And my teacher is like 75 years old. She's awesome. And so this is sort of what I like about it is the integrative aspect of everything. So what it would look like is, obviously when somebody comes to me, we do an intake, obviously a little bit of your history. And then what we do is we always set an intention. What is the intention? So, even in my own training, we had to do 30 days of breathing. So every day I'd have an intention. I'm releasing my belief that I'm not good enough, or I'm releasing my fear of rejection, or I'm releasing my fear of failure, or whatever, right? So we set the intention. And then we start off with about 10 minutes of circular breath, because we're not breathing. There's 7 different dysfunctional breathing patterns. And I don't know your breathing pattern. We all have it. But if you watch a baby, they don't have it. A brand new baby, they're breathing beautifully. Their whole body moves. So the armor is what's protecting us. So we started with something called circular breath, because we're breathing backwards. We're breathing reverse breathers. So circular breath is this way. So we breathe through the mouth. Do you think? So it's try and match the intake, exhale with not too many pauses. And in the beginning, you'll start coughing because you get dry mouth. So I guide you for that for about 10 minutes. I check your chakra system, because as we're breathing in oxygen, we're also breathing in energy. So the chakras will start to open, but I check to see which ones are blocked. And the other thing is, in this type of work, I'm going to keep you grounded, because most people will leave their body.
Absolutely.
So I go and touch the feet when I see them leaving. I pull them back into their body. So we start breathing like that. And then after that, we will go into a fast and connected breathing for the next 40 minutes. So it's like this. Excuse me. So yeah, for about 40 minutes. And people go, oh my God, I can't do that. And we'll go through it, and it puts them into an altered state. So what happens with that energy starting to move, and I'll remind them their intention. And I said, in the beginning, people will struggle to let go of control. Remember, we had that control. So the fear is there, right? And we work through the fear, and I go make it bigger, and your body just wants to release the fear. So all this armor that we have starts to fade away, and whatever's repressed will come to the surface. And often if we have a belief, like I'm releasing my fear, it goes somewhere else. The body, the natural healer within us, the wisdom within us knows where to go. But and then when we do it, there is a corrective action. This is what I love about this particular modality. You can breathe as much as you want, but if you don't do any corrective action, nothing changes. So as a facilitator, what I find in my work is the person that holds the power of your healing is your inner child.
Right. That doesn't surprise me.
This is all, and unless I've had a trauma for now, we always go back to an age. And as a facilitator in the type of work I'm doing, if I have a 6-month-old baby or a 2-year-old that is feeling abandoned and is crying in a corner, part of the corrective action is, what does that 2-year-old need, right? That she's not alone or he's not alone, that there's somebody there. So it would either be, depending on the regression, I'd either hold the hand or put my back against somebody to feel the support, or if it's a really small infant, I will scoop them up. Because you have to tell the body, and in that state, the adult's not available. It's a 6-month-old baby that is now feeling safe, right? And then there's a corrective action. It's like, what does that child need that they never got? Right. So there's always a corrective action, and sometimes I will use music with my clients to anchor in that feeling that they felt in their body. And I have seen it in my work. It's fascinating watching. I love watching my clients. I'm so gifted to have such beautiful clients and who are willing to go into that depth. I have clients that, I've gone into therapy, and then I go home and I go, well, now what? But when I do this, it's like I can feel the shift. And, and I sometimes work with business owners that have blocks around abundance. And it's fascinating when we do a shift around that. I get these texts. Oh, my God, I got this offer. It's like, I got this new client. Because we're removing the blocks, but we're removing layers. There's a layer upon a layer upon a layer, because there's a coax of trauma, right?
Absolutely.
So it's whatever comes up, you think, oh, well, I've dealt with that. And next month it's there again. It's
always deeper. Yeah.
Well, it's always deeper, because you have your root trauma, and then there's layered upon layers, right?
Absolutely. That's beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm actually keen to try it out myself now.
Good to know that. Let you know that I'm planning to have the teacher come up here to train counselors and psychotherapists in this modality that want to use it with their clients.
That's wonderful. I've noticed just in the past few months a lot more, especially because of COVID and because people are so isolated. People are really rediscovering somatic experiential. It's not talk therapy. And I know, like, we belong to a big psychotherapy group on Facebook there. And so often I see people asking for referrals for EMDR, havening, brain spotting, breath work, somatic work, right? Experiential. Yeah. So how can people get in touch with you if they want to get in touch with you?
Sure, they can go to my website, which is www.dieriseborough.com. My email is die@dieriseborough.com, and they can, there's on my Psychology Day profile as well. They can reach me via that. I do virtual and in person as well, for clients that have COVID protocols in place.
Absolutely.
And yeah, basically that's how I do it. Yeah.
Wonderful. I'll put all those details in the box below. And you also mentioned your book. I'll get those details from you as well and put those in the show notes as well if people want to learn more about the forgiveness and that piece. Di, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Well, thank you, Ben, for having me. It's been great talking to you.